All right, welcome everybody. So today we are going to be having a little discussion about communal or collective gardening. And the definition of that is that in a communal garden or collective garden, all of the gardeners in a community garden take care of the entire space, all of the vegetables, all of the area around it, as opposed to what I always thought of as a community garden, which was that everyone has their little box and kind of that's how it goes. Once I started working for Gather New Haven Community Gardens, I started meeting all the people that you see here and started hearing about the wonderfulness of collective gardening and how important it is. And the more we talked about it, the more we realized that we wanted to share more about it with everyone here. So with us, we have Nadine Horton of the Armory Garden, which is on County Street between Whaley and Goff, Folly Delgado of the Clinton Avenue Garden, which is behind the Clinton Avenue School, Trish Helm of Springside Garden, which is tucked away at 81 Springside Avenue, and Maria Tupper of the Bioregional Garden, located at 608 Whitney Avenue. And we have my cat. My cat is not going to be doing a presentation, though she thinks that she is. Okay, all right. All right, let's get started. So each of these gardens is very different. And so first I'd like to ask you all to briefly describe how your garden works as a communal garden. And we'll go in order: Nadine, Folly, Trish, and Maria. So Nadine, can you get us started?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I just want to say your cat looks just like my cat, Maya. That's so funny. And she just left the room. So as Eliza said, I am the garden coordinator for the Armory Community Garden, which is located on County Street, right next to the historic Gulf Street Armory and right behind the Whaley Avenue Jail. We started next month, actually will be our 5th year. And we took over the plot of land, which is that huge lot that is fenced off right next to the Armory. And we started as a communal garden, which means that everyone gardens together. There were no individual beds at the garden. That was the intention when we started. And it's been working out beautifully. Right now, I was just at the garden yesterday with one of our gardeners to kind of just get a feel for what we need to do in the upcoming weeks when we start our workday. But we have about over 30 beds now. And that was a combination of us when we just started with the garden. And then we did some work with a local nonprofit organization, which recently dissolved, and they gave us their beds. They donated their beds to us. So now we have over 30 beds. And they're all communal with the exception of 2. And it just works just like you think it would. Communal gardening means we all work the beds together. We all decide what we're going to plant. We all harvest together. We just work together in taking care of the garden. Like I said, there's only 2 individual beds right now, and I know we'll get into that a little later. And the only reason we have 2 individuals is because we have a couple seniors who asked for those beds to be separated out because they wanted to grow some specific items to them that we don't grow communally. And so we said, absolutely, that's fine. Other than that, of the over 30 beds, 2 are individual. So the other 28 are communal.
Great. Folly, can you describe how your garden works?
Yes, hi, I'm Folly Delgado, coordinator of Clinton Avenue School Garden. Our garden is manned by a 4, sometimes 5-person crew. At the beginning of every workday, we do have our work days are sometimes flexible because we are located in the school. So sometimes it changes up when school is out. So at the beginning of each workday, the garden is walked, a priority list is created, and then tasks are divided up. We have 20 beds and 4 additional planting areas. 2 of the beds are designated to the students, and they can plant whatever they want in those beds. And the students do often join us during their lunch period. So they help in the entire garden, not just taking care of their own beds. The varieties we plant are decided by the community and the residents, and that's just from us watching, taking note of, what seems to be the favorites, and just by talking to our neighbors and the community members to find out what they would like us to grow. Most of the community harvesting is usually done in the late afternoon and on the weekends. That was not a rule of ours, but because we're located in the school, that's just how it's always worked out, and that has worked out fine. And that's pretty much how it works at Clinton Avenue.
All right, thank you so much. Trish.
Hi, Springside Garden is sort of a secret garden. You can't see it from any road, which is a plus and a minus. But it is, as Eliza said, on Springside Avenue, which is off Lake Street. We're one of the larger gardens in Gather, New Haven. And we started out in 2010 with community members participating. Prior to that, it had been it's owned by the city, by the Parks Department, but a halfway house had used it as one of their, projects or work projects, but it was not successful, managed in that way. Because the halfway house was on the other side of the country. I mean, on the other side of the city. And they just didn't get out to the garden often enough. And so it was opened up to the community. So the history of Springside Garden is that it was communally gardened because all the people from the halfway house were supposedly gardening. Since the community members took over in 2010, we have expanded the number of beds. And I think we have like 15 to 18 raised beds. And then we have a lot of in-ground beds. And we designate the in-ground beds for fruiting crops. And then the raised beds are for the leafy crops, so that we have a higher than desirable level of arsenic. And so that mitigates, the fruiting crops then don't pull up the arsenic. We have about 16 gardeners in Springside, and we have 2 work days, Saturday and Sunday, and decisions are made what we want to plant. We usually have a planning meeting in February, but that didn't work out too well this year. So we're having a planning meeting today. And we grow the usual suspects. And then if somebody wants to plant something in particular, there's always room. We started out with a small number. I'm forgetting what the crop is now. But anyway, we nixed corn because it takes up too much room. But we make communal decisions what we're going to grow. And that's how we work. We did have one individual bed in the very beginning, and that lasted one season because it was too annoying to see a neglected bed. And that was probably in 2011. And that was the first and last time we had an individual bed. No neglected beds in our garden. All of our beds are worked and are planted, and it's much more satisfying. And it's fun because we all work together.
Right, wonderful. Thank you so much. Maria, how does your garden function?
Well, in many ways, it's very much like what other people described. We've been a garden since 2007. Our garden is on the property of the First Unitarian Universalist Society of New Haven at 608 Whitney Avenue. And they have this large, they have a large piece of property that stands next to the building that where they meet. The advantage is that we have a house that we can use the facilities inside, which means that we have a bathroom that we can use, and we have a kitchen with a sink that we can use if we need to. We have 10 members in our garden. We have no raised beds. Our beds are all in-ground beds. And when we first came to the garden, we had the soil tested, and then we took off the top layer. When I think about this now, how much work it was, we took off the top layer of soil to be sure that the soil that we were growing in was safe and didn't have any chemicals in that would be dangerous in terms of growing food. And that part of the garden can be seen from Whitney Avenue when you walk down Whitney Avenue. We have 10 members in the garden. And just like the other communal gardens, we grow a large variety of things and we make decisions together. We have a meeting in February, which we did on Zoom, to decide what we were going to grow this year. And then at the end of the season, we have like in November last year, we have an evaluation of what did well and what we want to change. In the back of the garden, the property extends very deep. So there's a parking lot behind our garden, and at the end of that property, we have a step garden that goes up an embankment. So we have more growing space in the back. And as gardens go, it's not an overly large garden compared to what you heard from Nadine and Trish. And Folly's garden also is much larger, but we produce more food than we can use with our 10, 11 garden members. And so what we do is we contribute that to food banks or other places that we know can use the fresh food. But we'll talk about some of those things more as we go on.
Yeah, that transitions really well into our next question. So we've touched a little bit on the benefits that you've all noticed from communal gardening: fewer neglected beds, more food production, which did honestly surprise me when I learned about it. Can you all touch upon some more of the benefits that you've noticed with this style of communal gardening? Nadine, would you like to go first?
Sure. The immediate benefit that I got from communal gardening is I'm a city kid, so I'm born and raised in New Haven. I knew nothing about growing food, period. All my fruit and produce, vegetables were purchased from the store. So I had no clue how to grow vegetables. My dad was from North Carolina, grew up on a farm, but none of those genes passed to me. So I had no idea. So communal gardening for me was a chance to learn without feeling overwhelmed or foolish or just feeling like I couldn't do it. So because we were all learning together and there were different skill levels among the gardeners, I should back up and say we have 8 to 10 core gardeners at the Armory Garden, and then lots of folks pass through, but we have our 8 to 10 core gardeners. And between us, we all learned together. And like I said, there were differing levels of gardening skill, but because we were all learning together, no one felt left out. No one felt like they couldn't do it. So that was an immediate benefit for me. Secondly, just the idea of working together. We have different age groups. We go from young to our seniors who are 75 years, 76 years old. Youth, we have, it was just a chance to all come together in a setting where I don't think we would have done that necessarily normally, particularly with the young people that we really had an uptick in over the past couple of years. And by young folks, I mean probably in the 19 to 22, 23-ish range. It was a chance to come together in a relaxed setting and learn from each other. The other benefit of the communal gardening is we all get to decide together, so there's no disappointment. We all sat down as a group and we said, this is what we want to plant. So there's no feeling of, well, I'm growing this and this is mine. You know, I don't want to grow that. We all agree as a group. So we all, you know, want to be part of the success of that crop because we all decided on it together. The other thing I think that I benefited from is just meeting people that I wouldn't normally have the chance to meet because of this garden community. Again, it's a way to bring folks together in a relaxed setting, and the conversations that just naturally happen when that takes place are priceless, and I don't think could be replicated in any other setting. And we have a big space. And if we didn't do this all together, it would be a lot of work to fall on one person. Our 8 to 10 core gardeners are like nucleus. We get stuff done. But like I said, we have a lot of folks who pass through. We have a lot of like Yale med students who pass through. And when we like do a call for volunteers, because one of our core gardeners is a resident at the med school, she can just hit her network. And next thing we know, we have folks coming, even if they just come for a few hours or a day, it's a lot of hands that makes the work very, very light because again, we have such a big space. So just that ability to come together, work together, develop a network of people where we can call on, again, with different skills. We have some gardeners who are like very handy with carpentry skills. So they bring that to the garden and they can build stuff for us that we would otherwise have to buy. So we just that level of being able to source the different talent levels of folks. And again, we all come into this together. So we all have, we you know, succeed or fail together is very, it's special. And it helps, I think, to make our garden successful.
Thank you so much. Folly, what benefits have you noticed from this style of gardening?
Well, I love the fact that we really get to know the neighborhood. Even though we have a small crew, we always welcome neighbors and volunteers to come work with us. So we really get to know the neighborhood. We have a couple of families that have children, and we're starting to see those kids grow up. So that's really nice. The kids really love to come and hang out in the garden and chase butterflies and dig up worms. And so that's wonderful that we're getting to know the neighborhood. Also, I agree with Nadine that it's really great to have everyone working for the success of the entire garden, opposed to, and all gardens are great, but instead of people just working for the success of their individual bed, we're all coming together to see the whole garden be successful. So that is definitely a benefit. I find that our tasks, we're able to complete them quickly and more efficiently. And the thing that I really love is we're able to get the less desirable tasks, stay on top of that, like number one, weeding. And I always joke every year that, I mean, as much as we love to garden, such a big percentage of it is the non-glamorous stuff. just the weeding and the pest control and the, and the disease control. And I think because it is communal, all our beds are planted in a polyculture style. So we're just able to have a lot more focus and stay on top of pests and disease and weeds.
Great. Polly, could you really quickly describe what you mean by polyculture style?
We plant, what we do is we do not plant just one crop in a bed. Our beds are 4x8, and we usually divide them in thirds and plant at least 3 crops in a bed, and always make sure that we include some beneficial flowers and to help deter, to keep the bugs confused and just have a better result. And that way, if it just works out, it just seems to work out well that way for us.
Great, thank you. And I just want to tell everyone listening that we will be doing questions at the end. So if you have questions, you can either save them to then and come off mute and ask them, or if you want to type them into the chat, we will address them at the end. So if something comes up and you want to ask a question, feel free to enter it into the chat. But continuing on, Trish, what have you noticed are the benefits of this style of gardening?
Well, I would add, although I think both Folly and Nadine touched on it, we have 3 or 4 really ace gardeners in our garden. And so you have the benefit of the knowledge of these highly experienced and very knowledgeable gardeners invested in the entire garden. So were they to have 1 or 2 beds of their own, and you could go over and ask them questions about your garden, your garden bed, which might be suffering from something, but how much better it is if those highly knowledgeable gardeners are invested in the success of the entire garden, which is what we have. And every year, we try something new. Like last year, we tried growing our butternut squash up a large, heavy trellis, which was successful, and it worked out. And we tried Ugle and tried to plant our sweet potatoes in the Ugle, and that was not successful. But everybody was invested, and everybody is willing to give it a try. And the expertise is invested in the entire garden. And people always come up with a notion of they want to grow such and such. Like we had a couple okra plants, and they were so successful that we've dedicated an entire bed to growing okra now, that everybody was convinced they really loved it. And so there's enough room in our garden that if someone develops a passion for a certain kind of pepper, then then we plant that pepper out. And we're starting to do a little bit more of interplanting, as Folly described, although we try to have an entire bed dedicated to a crop, although we might interplant with other plants that, lettuce that could grow under the tall kale plants or something. And we always have 2 or 3 gardeners who are kind of on a mission in the garden. And like one gardener, thank goodness, loves to weed, Folly. I won't tell you who it is. You can't have her.
Okay.
And then other gardeners, we have 2 gardeners who are on a mission to plant, to have wood chips all around the perimeter of the garden so that we can actually walk the perimeter of the garden. So people get bees in their bonnet and we turn them loose and say, go for it. But it is critical when you have that the entire garden is being planted, that you have to have some coordination of, today what we are going to do is such and such, or we won't get anything done. And in a large garden, you need more than 2 people. You need a critical mass to get something done in a large garden. And so we're much better off with 4 to 5 people. And we usually get that, and we have 2 work days a week. So if someone can't come on Saturday, they come on Sunday. But there needs to be some way of prioritizing, or people would go off doing their little missions. So we do have to rein some people in. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. Maria, what are the benefits that you've noticed from communal gardening?
Well, there's so many. I mean, one of the biggest ones that I've enjoyed is having the space to try different things. And if you're planting a communal garden, you don't have a bunch of boxes that have 4 or 5 of the same plants in each box. In this case, you have a great variety of things growing in different boxes, very much like what Trish was saying. But one of the other advantages is that we learn from each other. So one of our gardeners is Domingo, the man who does Peels and Wheels and collects compost from people all over New Haven. And Domingo is absolutely passionate about, you not only grow plants, but you grow soil. And he is teaching us about growing soil all the time. And he's talking about the microorganisms and on and on and on. So I just have learned so much from him. I've been around for a long time in terms of my age, and I've been gardening since I was quite young. And I feel like, you know, the thing to know is that no matter how old you are, there's new things to learn. So that's a part of what you get from gardening communally. The other thing, our garden is on Whitney Avenue, as I mentioned before, and people walk by and they stop and they talk to us. And that's really fun. And we have learned from the people who walk by. And so it's not just the people who are in the garden, but it's the people who stop by to talk to us. So one of the things we learned, we've been growing sweet potatoes. I'm really sorry to hear that your Hugel didn't produce good sweet potatoes, because we had great ones. But one of the things we learned is that you can eat the leaves that grow on the vines. The sweet potatoes are in the ground and they produce these abundant vines. I mean, in fact, they kind of take over everything. It's like crazy how many vines you grow. And so some Asian folks who live down the street from our garden were walking by, and they asked if they could harvest some of our sweet potato leaves. And so if they did it, we decided we should give it a try too. And I'm suggesting to everybody, if you grow sweet potatoes, harvest some leaves, leave enough there to nourish your potatoes, but be sure to eat some of those leaves because they are out of sight delicious and they cook up as fast as spinach. It's great. We have regular work days, and sometimes people come by if they want to and do things in between. But I think one of the other big advantages is that we get to know each other. We work together, we develop a relationship with each other. And because we usually meet on Friday afternoons, we take a little bit of time at the end when we're all done doing work, and we sit on the front porch of 608 Whitney, and we spend an hour socializing with each other and just catching up. And in the past year with the pandemic and people having problems to be with other people, we could have a nice social distance, and some of the people who garden with us live by themselves, and it's been a hard year. And so this was a time that we got to socialize and talk. When we're in the garden, we talk too, but you know, you're usually busy doing what you're doing. And so we know that we have this time at the end where we spend half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour together and just talk, and that's been great. In terms of organizing what we do, we have a whiteboard that we can keep in the building. And at the beginning, we come together and we write down what we need to do, and then people choose the jobs they want to do. So that's been a real nice convenience. And in terms of planting, we do a lot of companion planting. which I think is what Nadine talked about too. And here again, various members of the garden do research about what are the things that support each other in companion planting when you plant things next to each other. That's probably enough for me.
Great. Trish, could I ask you, the whiteboard thing reminded me of it. Could you tell a little bit about how you communicate to your gardeners who come in between work days?
It's been, historically, it's been a frustrating issue, and it's taken a while to work this out. For too long, it was 2 or 3 gardeners knew what was going on. 1 or 2 of them would go almost every day, honest to goodness. And so they were keeping track of what needed to be done, and all the burden fell on that person. But we started getting better about emailing at the end of a workday, emailing all the gardeners and saying, this is what we did. This is what needs doing beyond what we did. And that's been working pretty well. We're all trying to be more conscientious about emailing the entire group, because people do come in. People are welcome to come in the middle of the week to harvest, and then they want to do some work, and so they need to know what to do. So emailing the group has helped. And then, as Maria described, we started using a whiteboard, which melted. And now we use a window, and we write on a window, which is leaning against our hoop house. And the window has been a really good means of communication. When somebody comes, the window is sitting there, what needs to be done. So between emailing and the window, people generally know if they choose to come in on a Tuesday or a Thursday, they know what needs doing.
Great. And Nadine or Fale, do you have any ways of communicating to gardeners between work days, or is that not really something you guys have?
Well, again, our core group is small. We've besides being fellow gardeners, we're very close friends. So we communicate, and we don't have difficulty communicating at all. Just a quick email or a text or phone call, and it works out.
Same, we do the quick text more than email. Definitely text has been a lifesaver. But we just got the idea from Trish, and who was kind enough to actually donate a window for us to write on the tasks. And that has proven to be a game changer as well, because like has been said, there were 2 of us who, people always ask, what do we do today? What is there to do today? Even though we always start out with the same thing every garden work day, we always start out with weeding or harvesting, but still, people would just, what do you need to be done? So now we just say, go look at the window. We started that midway through the garden season last year. But if there's, and also we assign tasks, like somebody will take on watering during the week, especially during the summer. So we know that there's certain tasks that need to be done. Somebody will come through and just do some weeding before the big garden work day on Saturdays. And then if anything else needs to be done, we just shoot a quick text and it's fine.
Okay, great. And I know Eileen from Chapel Seed is here, and I've been to her garden, and she uses a notebook that they write in talking about tasks for gardeners who come in between work days. So that's another way to do it. Really quick, can we comment on, do you really get more food from a communal garden? I think people are unconvinced, but.
We get a ton of food from a communal garden. I mean, so much so that we had to cut back on what we planted last year because we got so much food. And we'll talk about this later, but there's only so much that the gardeners themselves can take. And then, we say, take as much as you need. take stuff home to your family and friends. Where we're located, we get a lot of people who just walk down the street, pass by. We're like, here, do you want some? We even put out like a green box where we just put, food that we harvested for the day. We put it in the green box with a note that said, free, take it. We get a lot of food from a communal garden, a lot.
Yeah, we do too. And one of our, two of our gardeners are involved in a soup kitchen, a local soup kitchen, Loaves and Fishes. So they take a lot of excess of our food to Loaves and Fishes. Otherwise, I don't know what we would do.
I agree. We also, I think that we have the ability to grow a little bit more food. And I had said earlier that we plant our beds in a polyculture way. Certainly not all of our beds. We also do plant potatoes and sweet potatoes, and certainly those are monoculture beds. But in the other beds, what I like about why I think we can get more food in the beds where we do plant in a polycultural way is because we have a problem in that bed, and oh my goodness, the kale is being ravished by whatever. We don't have to worry about losing an entire bed. We can take care of that area and then go to another area and maybe replant. So and we've had that problem in the past where we've had an entire crop just wiped out. And I think in a communal setting, you have more of an ability to make an adjustment and go somewhere else and replant and still have the benefit of having that crop.
Right, good point.
Great, thank you. Changing topics slightly, this question is for Nadine specifically. So your garden is open Saturdays from 12 to 2 for anybody who wants to come. How do you manage it when you're not sure who's going to show up, how many people you're going to get?
So if nothing else, I know I'm always going to be there. So that's a given. I always have one person. But we usually, like I said, we have our core gardeners 8 to 10. Of those 8 to 10, I know without fail that I'm going to at least get, no question, let me not exaggerate, 3 to 4. So the way I just manage it is because all the core gardeners, so our garden it has a lock on it and it has a combination. So the core gardeners know the combination. So at any time, they can come during the week to do things, but I at least know on that garden work day, I will at least have myself, and then at least of the core gardeners, at least another 3 or 4. I do emails every week saying when the garden work day is going to be. And then, I mean, because our garden, we've been around for so long now and we have such a routine, it's not a big deal, even if we just have 2 gardeners, because we know what needs to be done. It's on such a, we have such a routine going that even if, and there have been times when just 2 of us have shown up for whatever reason, things happen, no big deal, that we can get the stuff, we can weed, we can water, we can harvest, and we can be done in those 2 hours. Sometimes it'll take us less than that because we just, believe it or not, sometimes it's a little helpful when not everybody shows because the talking, but stuff gets done and you can focus a little better. But we have such a routine at the garden that it's not a problem if folks show up. I know I have that core group, but again, I put out emails. We have a Facebook page, which I'm horrible at, and I set up the group because I hate social media. But I just, again, our network of gardeners, they've gotten some family members involved. So if they can't make it, they'll come. And again, because we are where we're located, people just walk down the street. I kid you not. We've had people, hey, what are y'all doing in there? You start a conversation. You want to come in? We had one gardener who's a gardener now, who he just would walk down the street and he would see us every Saturday out there working. He's like, hey, what you doing? Stop, have a conversation, stop, have a conversation. So one day we were like, why don't you just come on in here? And now he's a gardener. So I've had times where I'm doing something. A guy was walking down the street with his dog. He's like, hey, sis, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just doing some stuff. You need some help? I love our people because they just do that. And he just stopped. He tied his dog up on the fence and he started helping me do some stuff in the garden. So I think our location helps as well, being so visible. People are curious about what you're doing. And because, you know, you have that, or there's a welcoming atmosphere and spirit with the gardeners and of the garden itself, where people are like, you need some help? Sure, I'll help you for a little bit. So that it's never an issue for us in terms of if we don't have all 10 people show up, because I know at some point, even if it's just me, which is rare that it's just me, but even if it's just me, people just walking down the street will stop and help. So it's not a big deal.
Great, thank you. I'm going to kind of combine the next two questions. So this is a question for everybody. What is necessary to coordinate a garden like this? Do you need gardening knowledge? Do you need multiple coordinators? What do you recommend to coordinate a collective garden? And then part two would be, if a garden right now is just individual plots and they want to start working towards becoming collective, what do you recommend? And Nadine, if you're ready to go first, I can call on you first. Been on the hot seat a lot.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Because of the size of our garden, like Trish said, we have to have multiple coordinators. I say that, and then you have to have multiple people. I won't even say coordinators. You have to have multiple people who can just pick up the task and just go. So I am the garden coordinator, so to speak, but it's a title, you know, in name only, because the core gardeners, they all have gardening knowledge now at this point. And at any point, there's been times when I haven't been able to get there for whatever reason. I'm not feeling good, I'm out of town, and the garden functions just fine. So I will say I am a bit of a control freak. So I like things done a certain way. And last year was a very good eye opener for me in an exercise of letting go a little bit, because, you know, there were times when I couldn't be there. I had different issues going on, and the garden still stood and it was flourishing. So that was great to me, that again, because of communal gardening, because it didn't all just land on one person, everybody knew what to do if I couldn't be there. So, you know, because we established such a routine, people come in, you know, you got to weed, you know, you got to water, you know, you got to harvest, you know, things that need to be done. That was crucial in ensuring the success of the garden. I think you need to have at least two folks like who can kind of organize things. So that's, I think, really important to have at least two, but because of the nature of our garden, everybody can kind of pick up the reins on a particular day and say, this needs to be done or that needs to be done. In terms of gardening knowledge, like I said, when we first started, there were all levels. I had none, I won't say none, but very, very little. To like master gardeners, we call him our garden guru, but he's so humble and he shares so much that he learned. But there were all different skill levels among that group of gardeners. I would say the thing you need to have is a willingness to learn. Don't be afraid to fail, because if anybody who's been gardening for any length of time knows you will fail. Get very comfortable with doing the non-glamorous work like Folly talked about, because everybody sees these pictures on Instagram and social media and, you know, gardening shows, and oh, it looks so lovely in the flower. There's a whole lot of work that goes on behind that, which is not fun at all. Like weeding, especially when you have, like, you know, a bad back or bad knees, or, you know, it's hot, the sun is beating on you and the stuff still needs to get done. It's like, well, they didn't tell us about that in the, you know, the Instagram video, but you have to get comfortable with doing the non-glamorous stuff. Being able to divide out physical labor, because again, we're like an all ages garden. There's some of us that can do more physical stuff, some of us who can't. And there's a lot of work around that. And I think just having a system in place. So having a dedicated workday, crucial. Having tasks that are a routine setup and tasks that need to be done. The window, again, has proved so helpful in saying we can just write the tasks out that need to be done. So if everybody can't get there on the garden workday, you can stop by during the week, you check the window, you know what needs to be done. Being able to have some system where you decide together what's going to be planted for the season. We haven't met yet, and I'm just going to do a quick survey to send something out to our gardeners to say, you know, here's what we have so far, and here's what do you guys want to do. Also, for our garden, and I'll just speak to our garden, yes, we are open, yes, we are communal, yes, we do things on a democratic basis, but sometimes me as the garden coordinator has to put the foot down and be like, hey, this is what we're going to do. Sometimes if you leave it too open, it's like, okay, nothing's going to get done. So I have to kind of just say, okay, here's the way we're going to go. Then if you want to add your input later, that's great, but I can't wait around for everybody to, well, I don't know. Let me think about, okay, this is how we're going to start. Let's go. Then we can always add during the time. And then I would say being in great contact with you in terms of, you know, you have, so we've been around, it'll be 5 years. I can tell you honestly, in that time before you came along in your role now, Eliza, it's like night and day, because I can contact you at any time. I can ask you questions. I can say we need this. You are in great communication. You respond rapidly. You bring up ideas. You brought to our garden the 3-bin compost system, which, you know, we had our little chicken wire compost bins that we made, that we were very proud of, by the way. But you brought to us that 3-bin compost system that, you know, the growing entrepreneurs put together. We wouldn't have thought about that. So again, it takes this network and this relationship. And if you haven't noticed by now, I'm a very relational type of person, and that's how I kind of the garden operates, very much on a relationship basis, and just being able to tap into the networks, but just being in good contact with you to say, you know, we need more of this, or we need this, or, you know, can you help us with that? What do you need? You put together these garden coordinator meetings, which again have been priceless. I would have never known Folly or Maria. Trish was our district coordinator, but I wouldn't have known these other phenomenal women, as well as the other garden coordinators who I've learned so much from, just from being on the call. So I think having a system in place is vital to having a successful garden.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so if you're a coordinator, come to the coordinator meetings, they're fun. Folly, what is necessary to coordinate a communal garden, and how could a garden that has individual plots start moving towards this if they wanted to?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what has worked for us. So this is my 7th year being involved with Clinton Avenue School Garden, but it's only my 2nd year as the coordinator. I think what's important, not just for the coordinator, but everyone who gardens there, is to recognize and appreciate what everyone brings to the table, their experience, their personality quirks, whatever it is, to recognize it, respect it, and be willing to work with it. Clinton Avenue has always been a successful garden, but my style is totally different from the previous coordinator style. But we still have this, we always had a successful garden then, and it's very successful now. So I think the group coming together, you know, when the task is handed off and someone else is now the coordinator, everyone being willing to say, okay, well, we're doing things a little bit different now. That is vital. I think cooperation and organization is so important. And I agree with everything that Nadine said. I really love the ideas of the whiteboard and the windows. I try to get there as a coordinator. I try to get there a few minutes early than everyone else. And I do a walk of the garden. And when I come up with the list, it might be totally different than what we said we were going to do the last time we were there. But, you know, we might get there one day and find massive groundhog holes. And, you know, I think you have to be flexible. And I just can't state enough, it is important to be able to recognize that, okay, you know, Susie or Mary or Lucy, they may think differently than, I'm just making up those names. They may do things differently than I do, and they may think differently than I do, but everyone brings something to the table, and it's all valuable. And I think that's important for me. And I'm fond of catchphrases, and I know I get on people's nerves with them. But last year, my favorite phrase was "work harder, work smarter, not harder." And you know, for me, that is important, to be organized, to be structured. I have a very, very large garden at my own house that I will not neglect because I'm involved in a community garden. So it's really important to me to stay on task so that I can maintain both, that we can maintain the community garden and that I can maintain my home garden. I think your second question was, how can people move towards communal garden? I think if you have a single family plot garden right now, start with one bed. You know, take the step and the commitment to start with one garden bed, and it will be successful and continue to grow from there.
To start with one communal bed for the garden.
Yes. And also, if you have neglected beds, now, okay, I've never been involved in a single plot garden, so this is just an opinion. If you have neglected beds, I think you need to take ownership of them and turn them into communal beds. I don't think you can have a situation where, you know, someone's aunt's cousin may come back in 6 months. 6 months of a bed could feed a lot of people. So that's just an opinion, like I said, because I've never worked in a single plot garden.
Thank you. Trish.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with what Nadine and Folly have said. I would say get people to agree what they want more of. Do you want more tomatoes? Do you want more kale? Do you want more okra? And then have 1 or 2 beds dedicated to growing exclusively something that everybody wants. And then I think you have to have a regular work day so that everybody is involved in that bed. And maybe you could have the involvement be watering this bed and staying on top of the seedlings or the seeds. But I would say 1 or 2 beds to start with, something that everybody wants to have more of, because how many tomato plants can you plant in a 4x8 bed, or how much kale? So that's what I would suggest.
Thank you so much. And yeah, based on conversations that we've had with this group of people and a few more, we are asking all of our Gather New Haven gardens to grow at least 1 communal bed this season. Hopefully that it is free to harvest for various members of the community and other gardeners. So hopefully everyone in our network will be experimenting with this, and we'll have some opinions on it from everybody next season. So Maria, last one. What do you think is needed to coordinate a communal garden?
Well, first I want to say that I feel like Nadine and Folly and Trish were so complete that I have very little to add. But I think the important thing is to make sure that everybody has a voice and that everybody is heard and everybody's respected, and that everybody can learn. And in general, I think all the benefits were really covered beautifully. And so I would like to hear from the questions that people have. And so I'll just shortcut my comments.
Thank you, Maria, for that transition, because I was just going to say, if you have questions, we would love to have you start typing them into the chat, or you can either raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or if you can't figure that out, you can unmute yourself. Yeah, Charles.
Yeah, I have a question for Maria Tupper because I'm in her group. Do you think that, this is just a thought I had, but you know how like chickens can be beneficial to a garden for multiple reasons? Do you think the Unitarian Church where we garden would allow us to keep chickens?
Well, I don't think that, I don't think where we are at 608 Whitney Avenue, I completely agree that chickens can be a source of all kinds of good things for a garden, but I don't think where we are located would be a very safe place for chickens. And they need a kind of daily care that I don't know that we can provide. So I think we have to think about being good caretakers. And if you have something like chickens, you've got to have a presence with them so that you're watching over them every day.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, plants you only have to look after once a week maybe, but chickens are like more of an everyday responsibility. I didn't think of that.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, if anyone has questions on anything that we've covered or questions you came with that we haven't gotten to.
Eliza, if I could just go back to something real quick about going from individual to communal beds. I think one of the things I learned in our last conversation that we had among the garden coordinators is I was surprised to learn that some gardeners, or I should say gardens, were individual bed plots, because I didn't think that was what community gardens were about. So I was a little surprised to hear that. I think if you have an individual plot or individual bed garden, you have to really ask yourself, what are you doing this for? Because the idea of community gardening is to build community, to feed community. And I love the point that was made by Folly is if you have a bunch of individual plots in a garden, then you really have a social club. You don't have a community garden. And if that's what you'd like to do, that's fine. But then you can't call yourself a community garden because you're not building community. You're not meeting the needs of the community. And we know if there's one thing that this pandemic has shown up in stark fashion is the food insecurity that exists in this city. It was always there, by the way, but this pandemic just highlighted it in a way that cannot be ignored. So if you call yourself a community garden, you have to have at the very least one bed in order to call yourself community. And again, there's been a lot of talk about a lot of issues among a lot of people, and people say the right things and they wear the t-shirts and they do the hashtags, but their actions do not match up at all with their words. And if we call ourselves community gardens and we gather a community garden organization, then we have to be about community. And that means opening up a community bed in your garden. In terms of having the conversation, you give gardeners a respect, especially if you've been gardening for a while, to say, look, this is what we should be doing as a garden. This is what we say we want to do. Now let's make our actions match our words. But also, as a garden coordinator and frankly, as Gather, being a community garden organization, if folks are not willing to do that, then in my opinion, and this is in my opinion, they shouldn't be part of the community organization, garden organization anymore, because how can you call yourself community if you are not, one, open to all community, and then also not gardening with the needs of the community in mind? I mean, Folly made such excellent points that meeting. I just kept playing them over and over in my head, and had a conversation with one of our gardeners yesterday that we at Armory have to get more intentional. we do that anyway, but in terms of getting food out to folks, again, we produce a lot of food, and we have to be more intentional about getting that food out to the surrounding neighborhood as well as across the city. We know folks are in need. We have to get that food out to folks, and we got to do a better job of doing that. So I would say if you're working in a garden, whether you're the coordinator or you're just a gardener, you say, look, we can sacrifice one bed, and that's the very least you can do, one bed to turn it into a bed that feeds the community, because we say that's what we do. Now let's make our actions match up to our words. And if you can't do that or don't want to do that, that's absolutely fine. That's your right. But then you cannot call yourself a community garden, and you should not get the support of Gather, because that's not what the mission of Gather is about.
Yeah, and I think since people haven't experienced too much collective gardening, another thing that I wanted to have you guys share is if you have open work days that people are able to attend. So like if someone is at this talk or sees this recording and would like to learn a little more about your garden, could you share how they could get involved, or if there's a certain time that they could stop by and see your garden and work in it?
So I'll just jump and go and say, so for Armory Garden, our garden work days are every Saturday from 12 to 2 p.m. We are going to start our garden season with a garden cleanup on April 10th, Saturday, April 10th at 12. And then going forward from that, it's every Saturday, 12 to 2. And we even go out in the rain. So unless it's like a monsoon, we're out there.
So for Clinton Avenue, we took advantage of that glorious week we had, I think the week before last, and opened up and started then. Right now, that information will have to be forthcoming because school is still in session and our garden is in a school. We're a little bit more restricted. So at this point, we're kind of sticking to our core crew because we are working with the students in the garden. But when school is out and we start being there more on the weekends, I certainly can have that information available. So I would say if anyone's interested in Clinton Avenue Garden, perhaps they would email maybe you, Eliza, at Gather, and then we can figure out something. But for now, with still so many restrictions in place, we're not really bringing in groups of people at this point.
Trish or Maria, do you have any open work days, or would you prefer that people just email me if they're interested in learning more about your garden?
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be good. And then I would know to be on the lookout for them. Our work days are Saturday and Sunday, and 10 to 12, but depending on the weather, then we make it earlier or later. But if somebody contacted you and you contacted me, I would be on the lookout for them.
I would just say ditto.
All right, great. I put my email into the chat. So feel free to email me if you'd like to contact anyone here with any more questions. So Mr. Ramey had a question. I'm looking for it in the chat. What is a good weatherproof, inexpensive outdoor bulletin board for messages?
I would say a window with a wax, with a wax pen, the kind of pen that writes on glass, because whiteboards melt.
And that whatever pen you use is waterproof.
Yes, I have agree with the window. I mean, windows are windows, so they're rated to be outside. And then I just picked up some wax crayons from, I think, the dollar store for kids because they're like waterproof, and that's proven extremely beneficial. We just leave them in the storage box, and then when whoever needs to write on the window, they know where they are, they just write on the window.
Great. Any other questions that anyone wanted to add, or any other experiences with communal gardening that anyone wanted to add?
I saw there were some questions that people had about varmints in the garden, you know, groundhogs and so forth. That was very early on. Somebody posted that.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, so she says, my greatest issue is pests. I have squirrels, rabbits, possums destroying vegetation and tomatoes. I put up a fence on 4 sides on each bed. Now I think I need a top. Does anyone have?
The thing that we used that really helped is we have deer fencing that is very high and it's hard to climb. Squirrels and chipmunks can still get over that. And then down low we have chicken wire. That's not at the bioregional garden. That I just like what Folly was saying, that she also has a home garden. This is at our home garden because we have a huge problem with deer because we live close to West Rock, and so we're right near the forest there, and so the deer just come up the hill, and I come out and found deer standing in the backyard looking at me like asking me, what are you doing here? And of course I say the same thing back to them. But so with the fencing, I don't know what to do about chipmunks and squirrels because they seem to be able to climb and do anything, but the low fencing that's partly in the ground, and I think that happened at Springside also, that there was fencing put in that was dug into the ground around the garden that helped with the groundhogs.
That was only so effective. And then one of our gardeners said, if you laid the chicken wire out from the fencing, we too have deer fencing because we're right at West Rock. But if you attach the chicken wire to the fence and extend it on top of the ground, he said that was effective, and then put wood chips on top. So groundhogs are very purposeful animals. But
Maria, I'm glad that you mentioned something that you use at home, and we don't use this at the community garden, but what I use at home, which works great for me for squirrels and chipmunks, is tulle.
I do too.
They don't like getting their paws caught up in that, and I was thinking about it for the community garden, but I just don't think we'd be able to maintain it. But I use it at home all the time to keep the squirrels and the chipmunks out, and also it's great for your brassicas to keep the cabbage moss off. So I just buy bolts of it, and I use it all over my garden. It really helps.
That definitely, I just started doing that, Folly, in my backyard garden. I also use shade cloth with the clips because I have PVC hoops on my backyard garden beds. So I just put the shade cloth on because believe it or not, we have no issues at the community garden with pests. But in my backyard, which is surrounded by trees, the squirrels are just, it is all I can do not to become homicidal and just kill every one of them I see. But shade cloth around PVC hoops, and you can get those at Home Depot for like $3 and just bend them. And clips have proved extremely helpful in just keeping them out. Also, I have this is probably my own fault. I have like birds that I feed, and the birds got a little happy around some of my like berries that were starting to come up. So I make sure I redirect them. So I have a bird feeder. So now they know this is their dedicated food. So it kind of keeps them away from my berries and stuff. But again, tulle and shade cloth with clips. And you can, like Folly said, you can go to Joann Fabrics. There's locations throughout there's one in Hamden, there's one in Milford. It's very inexpensive, and you just set that up there and the squirrels stay away.
Also, you can wrap, and if you want to take the time to do it, you can cut out squares And you can wrap your tomatoes. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was waiting for that tomato and I went out and not only was that one bitten by a squirrel, but 6 other ones. So you can also wrap your tomatoes while you're waiting for them. So I saw a question that popped up that said, where do you put the tool? Just use your imagination. And if you can grow something in a tomato cage, even if you have a big kale plant, if you can put it in a tomato cage and drape the tool over it. If you have a big enough piece where I have a whole bed of brassicas, and so I just made a enclosure structure, a frame, and that whole structure is draped in tool. So use your imagination, and I'm sure all gardeners know this. Some of the best things that I use in my garden before the pandemic were things that I found outside during our bulk pickup time in Hamden. So use your imagination and don't be afraid to scavenge. I wouldn't scavenge for the tool, but you can get it very cheaply at Walmart. They usually have it for like 99 cents a yard at Walmart, which is a lot cheaper than Joann Fabric. Or just if you go to sometimes at Amazon, if you're not picky about the color, you can get bolts of it for very little money.
And don't get the tool with the big holes. Get the finer hole
Right.
tool. And then to that point too, I have some containers and some little cement mixers that I use as little garden beds on my back porch. And I just wrapped the tool, like I tucked it under the bottom of the container on one end and then draped it from there across 2 little cement mixers that I use as garden, and just tucked it under the end. So,
Yes.
And in terms of outside, sometimes I've used, again, I have a lot of trees in my backyard, the sticks that fall, I just use them as like anchors to rocks. I don't go out and buy a whole lot of stuff. I very much believe in recycling what's available. It keeps it out of the landfill. It keeps it from looking messy in your yard. You use the sticks have proven as great anchors for just holding the tool in or whatever, shade cloth or whatever you're trying to do. And they also act as supports for your growing plants, vines, etc.
I want to make a quick comment. This was a great example of a bunch of experienced gardeners learning from each other as we just listened to this conversation.
So we've got a few more follow-up questions about tool. Mr. Connolly, did you have a question that you wanted to ask? Here, I can I can unmute you if you'd like.
The locations, I don't know where the gardens are.
Oh, I can type those in the chat if you'd like. Was that your question as to where the locations of the gardens are?
That's correct, yep, and I can communicate separately from this.
Okay, yes, I can type those into the chat so everyone can have them. And there are a couple follow-up questions about the tool. Is it the same as remay, and would you wrap it around the bed itself?
I'm not familiar with the word remay.
I'm not either.
Shade cloth. It's shade cloth.
Oh, shade cloth. No, it's
And
different from
there's
shade
different
cloth.
weights of shade cloth. You have
Mhm.
winter shade cloth, which protects against frost, and there's summer shade cloth, which protects against insects. And when you use it, you want to, as Nadine was saying, you want to prop it up so it's not laying against the little seedlings. And when you water it, it's extra weight, but it's enormously effective. And we do use hoops or whatever can prop it up through the bed, and then lay it over and secure it down along the edges. And you're protecting against insects, you're protecting against squirrels, you're protecting it against too much sun.
So tool won't get waterlogged that way. And it's basically, it's that netting that would be under those petticoat dresses. That's what tulle is. So, if people didn't know what tulle was, it's Tulle is the spelling.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get shade cloth or Remay at Agway, or you can order it from Johnny Seeds. You can order it from any place.
I got mine from Amazon. It's pretty cheap
Or
and
Amazon.
different sizes too, and different weights like Trish was talking about. And yeah, you can wrap it around the bed. You just, I would drape it. Again, don't have it touching because sometimes it can, get a little weighty, especially with the rain. But especially if you're using shade cloth, you have to prop it up or it's gonna like weigh down on your plants. But I just use sticks. If I don't have the hoops on my bed, and one of my beds in my backyard doesn't have hoops, so I just use branches to just stick in the middle of the bed, and then I prop it up on there, and then I drape it around the whole bed. And then I just use like rocks or again, little sticks to just stick in the corners and just anchor it down.
Eliza, this is another question. Someone was asking about when to eat the sweet potato leaves, and I would give them some time to grow. We do it when the vines are very well established, and it's like there's an excess of vines, because before that you want the nourishment from the leaves to go into the development of the potatoes.
I would agree with that. We just started doing that last year, Maria. I wasn't that fond of them. They're okay. I had to season them up a little. Let's just put it like that. But we do it when we harvest the leaves when we're just about ready to harvest the sweet potatoes. Like when you see them like take over the beds, because they really can take over the beds, the leaves, that's when we pull them. And we started pulling the potatoes, and then we have a separate pile of just the leaves where people would just take them and just either eat them or use them for decoration in their beds or whatever. But yeah, we harvest them to eat when we're just about ready to pull the sweet potatoes.
And not the vines, because the vines are tough, just the
Right.
leaves.
Right.
All right, so we have about 5 minutes. There was a question about using mulch to slow down weeds or garden cloth. What do you all use for slowing down weeds?
So at Armory, we don't use mulch. We just started because Eliza was kind enough to drop off to us. We use some straw. Otherwise, we just, if there's dead leaves around, I take that back. We were telling folks from their gardens at home or just cleaning up at home, your front yards, your backyards, just bring us the leaves to the garden, because we use that for mulch for the beds. So again, it's a way to keep it out of the landfill, get it out of your yard or whatever, and bring it to us at the garden. I took whatever I didn't use for my own backyard garden. I took like bags, 6 or 7 bags of leaves to the Armory garden. We just spread them over the bed. We don't use bag mulch at the garden, community garden. I stopped using bag mulch at home. For the beds, I just use leaves because I have so many leaves. It's better for the garden. We don't use them at the garden at all. We don't use garden cloth at the garden at all. What I was talking about, I use in my backyard garden. We don't use any protection, believe it or not, on any of the beds at the garden. And we've had no issues. Again, because we weed on such a regular basis, we can keep the weeds under control. That I have to say, and I know it's not what people like to do, but like Folly said, you have got to keep up on your weeds. I know there's a person that I follow on YouTube, Gardner Scott, who says you just, every day you go out and every time you go to the garden, the first thing you should do is weed. Because when you do that, it cuts down on so much work. You keep it so under control that when you do go to weed, it's quick. You can do it in a few minutes, versus if you let that go, it will take you hours and back aches and knee aches to weed. So I would say it's not fun, but just as often as you can, the first thing you do in your gardens is you have people weed. And that is the first thing we have gardeners do. When you come in the garden, the first thing to do is you weed. And you just go from there. But we don't use any mulch and we don't use any garden cloth at the garden.
So I would add to what Nadine just said, that one of the nice things about gardening with other people is that if you're working like maybe even in twos on a bed, you can talk to each other while you're pulling the weeds and get a nice experience that way. One of the things we have found more here at our home garden than at the community garden I work with is that leaves can be the source of pests. And so we put our leaves in the mulch, and the decaying process and what they add to the, not mulch, compost, is, it seems to get rid of the bugs. And so we have stopped using leaves as a cover to keep the weeds down, because we have found it to be a source of insects, and better to put it in the compost and let it really decay and become a part of the soil, and then you don't have the same problem with it. And if you can, salt hay is something that can be used as a mulch, but obviously that's something you have to purchase, and that becomes a financial issue. So I mean, that's going to be different in different places.
So I would like to add that if you have a chemical-free environment, grass clippings are wonderful mulch, and they add a lot of nutrition for your plants. And also another incentive for weeds, if your weeds are not flowering or, you know, going flower heads and seeding, throw them in a bucket, put some water in there and let them sit for a day or two, and that would be an excellent fertilizer. So if you need some incentive to pull those weeds, you can, that's a twofer. You can turn those weeds into a fertilizer.
So it's kind of like a compost tea?
Yes.
Made out of weeds? Cool.
And I just wanted to also say that if our answers seem short and vague, you can certainly just pick up the main points and go online and do your own research on anything that we've suggested.
All right, wonderful. Thank you all so much, all of you who shared your expertise on the panel. Thank you to everybody who came. Please get in touch at either eliza@gathernewhaven.org or info@gathernewhaven.org if you have further questions. And with that, I will end the meeting, and hope you all enjoy this beautiful day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, ladies. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.